chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, very good evening. I am Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. In the last few moments, Spain's Carlos Alcaraz has beaten Novak Djokovic in a 5-set classic to win his first Wimbledon title. Alcaraz lost the first set 6-1 to Djokovic, but he won the next two. Now, Djokovic, the defending champion, took the fourth set, so the match went to a decider, but he was broken early in the fifth and never recovered. Alcaraz, the world number one, taking the final set 6-4 for his second Grand Slam title. Djokovic was bidding to equal Roger Federer's record 8 Wimbledon victories and equal Margaret Court's overall record of 24 Grand Slam singles titles. A little earlier, the picture of the man you're just looking at there was the 17-year-old Henry Searle, who became the first British player to win the boys' title at Wimbledon since 1962. Europe is bracing for more severe heat amid predictions of the warmest temperatures ever experienced on the continent. Wildfires are continuing to burn on the Spanish island of La Palma in the Canaries. At least 4,000 people have been evacuated as a result, with almost 115,000 acres of land affected. British holidaymakers, meanwhile, travelling to southern Europe are being advised to take precautions, with forecasters predicting parts of Italy and Greece might reach the 48.8 degrees, the record recorded in Sicily in 2021. The government's hailing the UK joining an Indo-Pacific trading bloc, but critics say the economic benefits will be minimal. Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch says the deal will bring British companies a step closer to a market of 500 million people with fewer barriers, which she claims could create access to £12 trillion worth of global trade. But officials estimate it will add just £1.8 billion a year to the economy, representing less than 1% of UK GDP. The last ship to travel under the Black Sea grain deal has left a port in Ukraine. The deal allows Ukraine to safely export its grain and fertiliser. It's proven vital for stabilising global food prices and bringing relief to the developing world. The crucial agreement is on the verge of expiring. It is set to end tomorrow. President Putin says they won't renew the deal until Western sanctions on Russian exports are lifted, although he has threatened that on several occasions before. Emergency services are searching for a teenage boy who was swept away in the North Esk River in Scotland yesterday. Police, fire and Coast Guard teams, plus a helicopter, have been searching for the 15-year-old who got into difficulty in the water near Ganochy Bridge just after 5 o'clock on Saturday. And the British actress and singer Jane Birkin has died at the age of 76 at her home in Paris.
Je t'aime, je t'aime, oui, je t'aime.
Well, the President, Emmanuel Macron, has paid tribute to Jane Birkin and has described her as a French icon. She charmed France with her British music and fashion, and her big hit, Je t'aime, with the late Serge Gainsbourg. The actress was also the inspiration for the Hermes Birkin designer handbag. TV, online, DAB and TuneIn Radio, this is GB News. Now it's time for Free Speech Nation.
The former Minister for Women says we need a Minister for Men. Keir Starmer meets with Just Stop Oil. And a man wins the Miss Netherlands beauty pageant. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So, coming up on the show tonight, author and Professor of Criminology Joe Phoenix is here to discuss the rise in violent activism. And after Justin Welby said universities should have their funding cut if they fail to protect minorities, we're going to be asking sociologist Frank Furedi if the Archbishop of Canterbury should just keep his nose out of politics altogether. And, of course, myself and my wonderful panel will be answering questions from our beautiful studio audience. So, my guests this evening are comedians Josh Howie and Victor Daniels. And Victor, it's your first time on the show.
Yeah, I'm nervous. I didn't know they were going to be this close.
Well, the audience, they are. And they do bite.
Yeah.
They do. They're terrifying individuals, yeah. How are you, Josh? Good week?
It's a tough week, mate.
Why?
My wife left me for a few days. And it was
Is that
hard.
a joke?
Well, she left on holiday.
Oh, right, okay,
yeah.
fine.
But it was a nightmare.
It's got very serious very quickly.
Yeah, it was just like having to actually take care of my own children was quite
When you've got
traumatic.
enough of them, Josh, if you don't know, has 5 children. I mean, that's enough.
No, four now.
Oh, fine, OK.
So, it's a tough week. That's okay. That doesn't make sense as a joke. It's not
No,
funny.
it just sounds quite creepy.
Yeah, I'm
doesn't it?
sorry about that. I
Yeah.
apologise. That was a bit strange.
We're going to get some questions from our audience, but actually we've also got questions from you guys at home. This one was sent in by Monica. Don't see many Monicas these days, do you? It's a good name. Should school kids be allowed to choose their name and gender? OK, so I know why this has been asked, because this was a big story this week. This is official guidance coming out from the UK government, and it means they've basically been trying to clarify what's been going on in schools, and it means that teachers will have to refer to children only by the name and pronoun they want if the parents have given consent, and children can also wear the opposite sex uniform if the schools and parents agree. But on the other hand, if a child claims to be the opposite sex, it doesn't mean that the boy can go into a girl's toilets. It's a bit confused, actually, all of these guidelines, isn't it, Josh?
Yeah, it's very confusing, and also it doesn't really 100% make like whether you have to speak, you have to address the child, because it's not just boy, man and he, she. There's also they, them,
and Zhizha,
and all of the other stuff. And also, if you're a gender critical teacher, like if it goes against your beliefs to address someone as they, them,
yes,
you have to do it still.
Well, I mean, if you're an English teacher and you have to address a singular person by they, them, surely you'd have to correct your own grammar, and it'd be embarrassing.
Yeah, get fired.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it, Victor? I mean, is this encroaching on free speech in a way? Because say you're a teacher and you don't believe in gender identity ideology, and they're telling you, but you've got to use these made-up pronouns, but then you have to say it.
Personally, I think it's bang out of order and it shouldn't be allowed. And if it is allowed, to all the teachers out there, I think they should charge more.
Not to be teachers.
No, if I'm calling someone Louise and then next week you're telling me I have to call him Simon, I want more money.
Well, you should have more money, because it's a lot to remember.
It's a lot to remember, yeah. It's confusing.
It's bad enough, because I used to be a teacher, and I know that you have to learn like 200 new names every year. Right? If they've got to learn twice as many names, that's really going to be a problem, isn't it?
More money.
Yeah, more money then. Is that the solution?
Yeah, more strikes, that's what we need.
More strikes?
Yeah.
That's what we need. Don't get Josh started on that. He's very upset about strikes and teachers not doing their job, generally. We're going to move on to an email which came in from Eunice. Eunice? I think that's right. Eunice. Is Keir Starmer in bed with the eco-zealots? So this was interesting because Starmer, apparently it's been discovered that he met with representatives of Just Stop Oil. They came in to have a chat, and it's kind of difficult to know. We don't know what was said in this meeting, and we had a debate about this on Headliners the other night. Leo Kearse, as I'm sure you imagine, is very sceptical about this because some of the funders of Just Stop Oil have given quite a lot of money to the Labour Party, so he thinks there's some kind of influence going on there.
Yeah.
Do you think that's right?
It's fraud. I mean, I read it and it said 1.5 million.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm paying the Labour Party 1.5 million, I expect access to policies, their wives, the Wi-Fi code. I want it all. 1.5 million.
And
I want
I think
everything.
that's a bargain.
For the
1.5 million.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that's the thing. We don't look. I see it this way. If I was a sort of Just Stop Oil activist with a lot of money, like millions of pounds, I would probably give it to the party that I thought was already in my sort of ballpark. And I think that would be Labour. So I don't know whether we can assume that the money is paying for Labour to change its policy. I don't think that's fair.
But if you pay someone 1.5 million and they do a policy that goes against what you believe in, then what's the point in the 1.5 million?
Yeah, it's a waste of money. Absolutely.
Waste of money.
Yeah. What do you think, Josh? I mean, we don't. Like I say, we don't know what was said in the meeting. You know.
Yeah. He didn't meet directly, by the way, with them. It was one of his assistants.
Oh, it was one of his assistants. Okay, fine. Well, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
But the point about this is that Keir Starmer has been quite unflattering about.
He's been very clear how annoying he finds them, but also it makes sense to why not send someone out, find out what their demands are as such, and to see if you can in any way reach some kind of compromise to stop them. I mean, let's communicate with people.
I agree. And that's maybe
And
all
we
it
don't
is.
have to be blown out into this big deal that he's in the pocket of big stop oil or whatever it is. It's
I don't buy this idea that anyone who pays any money towards a political party gets some clout
Well, they
within
must
the
do.
party.
It's illegal in Nigeria. It's illegal.
What, to pay money to a political party?
Yeah, it's blatantly
Those
illegal.
parties are missing out. What are they doing? Honestly, that's...
So it's deemed fraud in some countries.
But in this country, they need it. Like, the parties rely on donations. It's absolutely clear.
Well, they should figure out another way of doing it.
They should. Maybe a whisk drive.
Yeah.
Something like that.
GoFundMe page.
OK, well, let's go on to another question now. This is from our audience. We've got an audience member called Peter. Where's Peter? Hi, Peter.
Hey, Andrew, this question's for you.
Oh.
So, as a man, will you be throwing your hat into the ring to be the next Miss England?
Well, I mean, I should. I have many skills. I want world peace. Anyway, this is... sorry, it's not all about me. This is, of course, about Miss Netherlands. And this is this incredible news. This transgender woman, so biological male, identifies as a woman, has won Miss Netherlands. As the article says, it broke boundaries. Women are getting a bit fed up with this, aren't they, Josh?
Yeah, but not the women who were cheering from the stage.
Right. But the women in the competition, they were happy about this.
They were all like, yeah, this is amazing, but then they would do that for anybody.
Well, it's a bit like when Leah Thomas won the swimming competition and a lot of the women who participated were cheering to show how progressive they were, but they still lost out on the gold medal.
They did, and since then, a lot of the people in that team have come forward and complaining and are actually suing now for it. But this, I mean, look, beauty is subjective, but...
Yes.
She is not the fittest person there.
You should judge it.
Of course I should. And I think that the people who did vote her should sleep with her.
That's an interesting development.
That's an interesting, you know what I mean? And then to sort of prove their worthiness.
That makes sense.
I mean...
if she's up for it, if that makes sense.
Listen, you know, like Josh says, all these people cheering and they're in the competition, you know that secretly they're thinking...
Of course.
You shouldn't be here.
And what they should be thinking is, how ugly are we for a man to win over a women's pageant?
Well, exactly.
They need a VAR or a recount or something.
How are they not offended by this?
Exactly.
There was another one of these in an American university where they had it was like a university beauty pageant. And there was a bloke there, like, who was, like, massive. You know, I'm not fattest or anything. I mean, like, just really huge, like a complete frump.
Yeah.
In this ball gown, and all these sort of very dainty, beautiful young women.
And he won.
And he won.
Oh, wow.
And, I mean, they're all cheering, because if they don't cheer, they're bigots. They're called transphobic and hateful. How about they're just realists, right? I mean...
Yeah, but as you say, that person won, and then of course there's mixed messages here because of course these beauty pageants are seen as being sort of part of the patriarchy and,
well, they're outdated
and misogynistic
anyway.
So it's suddenly like a man is winning this patriarchal competition.
Oh wait, so beauty contests are patriarchal and outdated unless there's a man involved, then it's progressive.
That's the world we live in.
Is that how this works?
How did he enter? Can I enter?
You can enter, Victor.
Oh, wow. I didn't know this.
easily.
Yeah.
In
fact, you just won.
You just won it. OK, so we're going to move on to a question now. This was sent in via Twitter. Never a good sign, but it's been sent in by Lucy. Lucy says, if my kid avoids confrontation, could this lead to genocide? OK, so I know what this is. That sounds like a cryptic riddle. But this is to do with this children in Church of England schools being taught there's a pyramid of white supremacy. This is an old anti-racism theory that effectively... It's like a kind of thin end of the wedge theory, and I've seen the pyramid, and it suggests that if you don't... There's a picture of the pyramid right there. If you do something as innocuous as not confronting racism, that there's like a slippery slope to genocide. Victor, isn't that a bit extreme, like going from one to the other?
It sounds a bit extreme. It is a bit extreme, especially when you're teaching it to children.
Yeah.
But...
Yeah, don't do that, kids, or you might end up wiping out a whole race.
But if you look through history, I mean, Rwanda, Nazis, slavery, I mean, there is something there. But to teach it to kids, I mean, kids just want to know how to play Minecraft.
Well, they do. And isn't a pyramid of white supremacy, is that not culturally appropriating Egypt? Because that's where the pyramids come from, right?
Oh, you've lost me on that one.
Oh, right, OK. What do you think, Josh?
I was like, whoa.
Yeah, and I think they control about 80, 90 schools, and all but 2 of them...
What, the Church of England?
Yeah, in this area, this diocese or whatever. Yeah. And I think all but 2 are primary schools.
OK.
So they're teaching this to young kids. I don't like the idea of teaching ethnic difference at that age. Like, I know it's part of the world, but you don't want them to start seeing these things, these differences.
No, you want them to treat each other as human beings and not think about which race
And a lot
people are.
A lot of children don't see race.
They really don't.
It's you teaching it to them. They don't really give a damn.
So there was a story on Headliners the other week about this, because there was a school that had they had funding for extra classes for kids that aren't doing well, but they said that only ethnic minority kids could go in there. So basically, the white kids who weren't doing well weren't allowed. And I just think segregating kids by skin colour, call me old-fashioned, I think that's quite bad.
Yeah,
personally.
When you look at children, they're not racist. It's taught to them by society.
Yeah, exactly.
So the schools are part of that problem.
Yeah, I think we need to, maybe there are better ways. You know, I think confront racism as and when it occurs. Don't teach these theories to kids that sort of hyper-racialise society. That's my view.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, they, at my kids' school, their primary school, they teach them about slavery, they teach them the history of it, and they also teach different figures from Black British history and Black American history and stuff. That's all good. Like, there's nothing wrong with difference. Difference is a good thing, but when you start making it about victimization and making like a hierarchy like that, I think that's where the issue comes in.
It's too deep.
It is too deep. I've got a friend who's a teacher who this visiting speaker came in and took all the black kids out of the class and sat them down and explained to them how oppressed they were. And they were all like, why can't our friends be in here? And their friends were like, why aren't we in with them? And it would cause this big thing. It's like, let's not do this, OK? Right, we've got a question now, and this is from our audience. Dale. Where's Dale?
Hi.
Hi, Dale.
Do you think we need a minister for men?
OK, so you might have seen this on the channel a bit earlier. This was Catherine Fletcher. She was Minister for Women under Liz Truss, and she was interviewed by Gloria De Piero, and she made the claim that we need a minister for men. I think we might have the clip. Have we got that?
Nobody gets anywhere by bashing one down. You know, there's some historic wrongs to right, but there are some things in terms of men that really do need a focus on them. You know, mental health, suicide, you know, male role models. So, personally, I'd have both, or have it explicit within have a men's health explicit somewhere within a ministerial portfolio.
So, what do we think about this, Victor? Because obviously the logic is with having a minister for women and equalities, you know, looking out for people who have been historically marginalised and that kind of, that makes sense. And the argument against this would surely be that men have always pretty much had it good. And so why do we need a special minister for men?
We have always had it good, but recently we aren't having it good.
You don't think?
Women are earning more money than some men in relationships, so that's a lot for men to take.
Well, I think actually the statistics show that in terms of the younger generation between 20 and 30, women generally earn more than their counterparts.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, this might ruffle a few feathers to have a minister for men. They say that men have specific problems, like higher suicide rate, more mental illness, this kind of thing. So is it more homelessness, that kind of thing? Do you think there's any case for this?
Yeah, absolutely, and less men going to university now than women as well.
Women have been outperforming men for 25 years in university.
Yeah,
no,
so there is an issue. It's really interesting because it seems like the last 20, 30, 40 years have been about making men and women the same.
Yes.
And actually, through this whole gender debate, it's like, oh, finally we can acknowledge that there are differences between men and women, and there are certain situations that need to be addressed for men and for women. And I feel like when we get through the craziness of what's been going on in the last 5, 10 years, maybe that we can actually start talking in a healthier place and acknowledge those differences and then grow beyond them.
Very interesting. OK, well, look, after the break on Free Speech Nation, Professor of Criminology Joe Phoenix will be here to discuss an apparent rise in violent activism. First, though, it's the weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. I hope you were able to enjoy your weekend. It has been a rather blustery one for many of us, but as we come to the end of Sunday, low pressure is pushing its way off towards Scandinavia, allowing those isobars to widen out, and the winds will be easing throughout this evening and overnight. Still, though, some showers lingering primarily across western areas of England and Wales, but more persistently across areas of Scotland, some longer spells in there at times as well. Elsewhere, we will see some clear intervals developing, and in those clear intervals, temperatures dropping down to around 11 or 12 degrees Celsius, so a touch fresher compared to some recent nights. Where you have those clear intervals, though, it means that you'll see some sunshine first thing to start off the new working week. A cloudy affair for Scotland, but all of us will eventually see some showers developing as we head throughout the day. Again, they could be heavy in places, particularly through central eastern areas of England. Some thunderstorms and hail is also possible. But with the winds turning lighter compared to the weekend, where you see those sunny intervals in between the showers, it will just feel that bit warmer as well, highs around 20-23 degrees Celsius. It's a Tuesday. Our focus then turns to this low pressure centre that's going to start pushing its way in from the west. So quite a damp start to Tuesday for Northern Ireland, and that rain will then push its way into northern Wales, northern England, lots of southern Scotland as well. Far north of Scotland, seeing sunshine and showers. The far south east of England also as well, staying relatively dry throughout. But as we head towards the end of the week, sunshine and showers returns once again. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Last weekend at the London Trans Pride March, Sarah Jane Baker, a violent male ex-con who identifies as a trans woman, took to the stage and said this.
I was going to come here and be really fluffy and be really nice and say, yeah, be really lovely and queer and gay. No, if you see a punch him in the face.
So, to discuss the apparent rise in violent activism, please welcome author and Professor of Criminology, Joe Phoenix. Joe, that clip went viral, obviously, for very good reason. One of the most disturbing aspects of that clip is not even so much what Sarah Jane Baker said from that podium about punching women in the face, but that it got a huge cheer from the crowd. What's going on there?
100%. And in fact, when I saw that, that was the first thing that struck me. I mean, people like me and others have heard that sort of expletive and that sort of violence a million times before in the last 5 years, sadly. And I find what the most disturbing aspect was precisely that whoop that went up afterwards. But more than anything else, after that thing went viral, we then had a complaint to the police, and they say, well, the police failed after the complaint was made. Not quite. The police failed at that moment. There were policemen at the...
There were police there, watching this event.
Precisely.
Yes.
And nobody said anything, nobody did anything. We have a couple of legal problems, which I don't want to dwell on, because I really want to talk about the reaction to what's happened. If you inhabit particular quarters of the Twitter sphere, what we've seen on, if you like, the other side, is perhaps the most shocking and very disturbing normalisation of violence against women that I've seen for a very long time.
Well, there's a few things to unpack there. I mean, let's start with some of the responses have said, well, this kind of thing happens on both sides of the debate. The MP, Clive Lewis, said that you hear this kind of thing on both sides. I have never, and I've watched and read an awful lot in this area, I've never seen a gender-critical feminist call for a trans person to be violently attacked, punched, in any way, anything like that. And if something were to happen like that at a Let Women Speak event, I don't think the crowd would cheer. I think they would stop that person from speaking.
I think they'd be deeply shocked to begin with, because we've all made a point. You know, it doesn't matter what sort of politics that you have within this movement, people have made a point to recognise the rights of transgender individuals.
Yes.
Right? And that's just how it is. But so you talked about the fact that the MP said harm on both sides.
Yes.
Let me tell you a little bit about this. As a criminologist, we have a concept called techniques of neutralisation. Now, techniques of neutralisation are a series of rhetorical devices. So the way you reframe something so that you basically deny the harm that's being done.
Right.
Famously, a man called Stan Cohen wrote a book called States of Denial, which was all about how states deny the crimes that they do when they commit human atrocities. Right? And there are 5 techniques of neutralisation. I just want to go through them because they're all present in what happened.
Interesting.
So the very first one is denial of responsibility. Right? It wasn't my fault. Well, what we saw immediately from the Trans Pride organisers was we didn't invite Baker.
Yes.
That came as part of an open mic.
Okay.
Then the second thing that you have is a denial of harm. Well, it was just words, wasn't it really? Nobody was hurt. No one was really the object of it.
Even though it is classified as incitement to violence?
Technically, but incitement to violence, you need to have an actual individual.
Right.
So that broad crowd thing is going to be a public order offence. So, they're going to say, well, it's just words. And actually, when Baker spoke then, Baker didn't actually mean it. So they deny the harm. Then denial of the victim. That's the big one that we see here. Well, TERFs deserve it. And in fact, if you think about, again, from Twitter, there were a lot of trans rights activists who were reposting that picture of the Polish woman who tried to hit the Nazi with her handbag.
Yes.
Right? Saying basically, you know, these aren't the real victims, we're the victims here.
Yes.
Right? So that's 3 techniques of neutralisation. The 4th technique of neutralisation is to condemn the condemners. Right? And, of course, we saw that in buckets and spades over the Twitter sphere, particularly with the trans rights activists, where they were saying, actually, this is righteous trans rage. Right? That's all Sarah Jane Baker was expressing, was righteous trans rage. And then the very final one is an appeal to higher loyalty. And that's where we are right now. The appeal to higher loyalty is, well, this was done in the name of the good. And in fact, what we see from, again, that particular part of Twitter is people talking about Sarah Jane Baker as a political prisoner.
OK. Now, but there was also a response from the young woman who glued herself to the floor when Kathleen Stock was speaking at the Oxford Union. She wrote a long thread sort of saying, she was saying, I don't justify violence or threats of violence, but what I'm saying is that we as a community are so under attack, subject to whatever, you know, phrases such as genocide has been used, denying existence of trans people, all these incredibly hyperbolic phrases that have a complete disconnect with reality. But when people use those extreme phrases, then I suppose they can justify violence as a form of self-defence. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. But that's also part of the condemning the condemners.
Gotcha.
Right? And it's also part of the denial of responsibility. So it's not us. We're the ones under the attack. We're the real victims. Now, the thing about these techniques of neutralisation is they're only ever used when the community that's using them know that what they're doing is incorrect.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
You have to recognise it first to deny it second.
That makes
sense. Which is a very interesting place to be at, because in fact what we're seeing is that rhetoric that's basically saying, no, really, despite everything, it is okay to punch a woman in the face.
But it doesn't work, does it? I mean, we've seen actual physical assaults at some of the Let Women Speak events organised by Posey Parker, for Kelly J. Keane, that is. For instance, in, was it in New Zealand?
Yeah.
And a 72-year-old woman was punched in the face.
Yeah.
That was caught on camera. We've all seen it. And this does not endear anyone to these activists'
No,
cause.
and of course it's not just, you know, things that happen in New Zealand. I can talk about an event that I was actually at the beginning of February at the University College London, a UCL Women's Liberation WPUK conference. And indeed, Sarah Jane Baker was there. And the real toxicity of that is that somebody like Sarah Jane Baker whips up the protesters.
Yes.
Right? So there's a clip that's making its way around Twitter, or did, where a young woman was shouting expletives, that basically saying, you know, F you, get the F out of here, and all this very, very hot atmosphere. And then, of course, what happened later on that afternoon is the protesters broke free from their enclosure, if you like. They went to go find the ground floor and the basement floor where the women were meeting in rooms, and they were literally baying and banging at the windows, right?
Yes.
Which, and again, is also quite aggressive. But then afterwards, a woman was actually assaulted by one of the protesters. So, you know, we see this sort of violence happening all the time. And until and unless it's recognized as what it is, violence against women, right?
Yes, perpetrated by men.
Perpetrated by men, more often than not.
Yes, but that's another interesting point, isn't it? It's insofar as this kind of aggressive, violent behaviour is far more common amongst men. I mean, the crime statistics reveal that indisputably, and yet this is a group of people who are trying to say, but we're women like anyone else.
Yeah.
Well, surely that's undermining their own point, isn't it?
Well, you'd think so. But of course, because they have an appeal to higher loyalty, we're doing it in the name of trans rights.
But how hard could it be for some of the prominent trans activists to say, we condemn all violence? You know, we see with the J.K. Rowling situation, where all of the death threats and rape threats are going one way. They're coming from extreme trans activists, who, by the way, I don't think represent trans people as a whole at all.
I agree.
They're a minority of very aggressive and violent people who are, I think, doing more harm than good to trans people. But we don't see it come the other way. We don't see gender-critical feminists sending rape and death threats. That simply doesn't happen. And everyone can see that. So why can't the activists say, look, we know you can see what's going on, acknowledge reality, then acknowledge that violence is wrong, and then go from there?
Well, that's a really interesting one. So there is somebody on Twitter, a trans rights activist, who has distanced themselves utterly from the sort of violent rhetoric. However, one of the reasons it becomes very difficult for them to distance themselves in the fashion that you're suggesting is because then they'd have to confront that thing called male pattern offending. And they'd have to recognise that actually, even within their ranks, as in, you know, male people who identify as women, that we don't know and probably suspect that even though they identify as women, it doesn't override that historical pattern of male violence.
Is that right? So the pattern is retained?
We don't know. There's only been one proper study that's been done, and it's very, very small and it's very local. And that's one of the questions that we desperately need to ask. What is this relationship between gender identity and biological sex? Because certainly in the area of crime, the sex patternation to offending is so great as to be perhaps the only true fact we have in criminology.
OK, well, there's an awful lot to go into here. I'm sure we'll have you back. Jo Phoenix, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Coming up on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be meeting the writer and editor who says she's lost work because of her gender-critical views. See you shortly.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Later in the show, I'm going to be turning agony uncle. With the help of my panel, Josh Howie and Victor Daniels, we're going to help you deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So just email us at gbviews@gbnews.com. .uk. We'll try our best to answer your issues. Now, on the show, we're often bringing you the stories of people who've been cancelled publicly for their views. My next guest claims she lost work because of her gender-critical beliefs. Sybil Ruth is a writer and editor who until last year was working for Cornerstone's literary consultancy as one of its core editors. But the work started to dry up after she says a member of staff took objection to comments that Sybil had expressed on Twitter. I'm delighted to say that Sybil Ruth joins me now. Thanks so much for joining me. So you were working at this literary consultancy. Do you want to tell us exactly what happened to you?
OK, well, you said that the work dried up. It was actually more dramatic than that. It was really, really sudden. I get given particular clients to work with. I'll work on a manuscript or I'll work with a writer over a slightly longer period, helping them to make their work publishable. And I was just given a new client. I thought, great. I started reading the manuscript, getting ready to do a report.
Yes.
Contacted the agency saying, oh, can you just ask them to send the file in a different format? And what they said to me is actually, well, hang on, no, you're not working on this. There's been a mistake. I thought, this is really weird because that's never happened before. It's not something that's supposed to happen. But I thought maybe there's an administrative error that they're just perhaps, sent it to the wrong editor by mistake. They weren't very apologetic, but I thought, OK, see what happens.
Yes.
A couple of weeks later, I thought, I'm still a bit worried. Maybe I'm not flavour of the month. So I thought, well, I'll go on the website and I'll just tweak my profile a bit to make sure that, all my experience is being highlighted. And I found I'd disappeared. You know, they'd taken me off the website.
Oh, from the literary consultancy? From Cornerstone?
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, it sort of felt like a kind of strange dream. You know, I kind of kept checking over, and, you know, are they redoing the website? No, everybody else is there, but not me.
So they hadn't told you they're eliminating you from the website, and then presumably you asked what's going on, right?
Yes, yes. So
what was
just
the
very
response?
straightforward. They said, oh, well, we don't think we're going to be using you anymore. And I was getting good feedback from clients.
Yes.
You know, and, you know, they'd just sent me some work. So it was sort of, on one hand, do some work for us. On the other hand, we're disappearing you.
Did they volunteer any information as to why they didn't want to use you anymore?
No, none whatsoever. I mean, there'd been an email that had gone round to all the editors saying, you know, we reserve the right to not use anybody who isn't in accordance with our values.
Yes.
And I wrote back to them saying, well, you know, values, you know, equality, diversity, inclusion, you know, all this is good. I did say that I felt I was concerned that sometimes the way in which that's interpreted means that sometimes debate can be suppressed.
Yes.
And I think it's very important for me as a gender-critical feminist, you know, to be able to talk about what's going on to women in society.
Yes.
And I got a rather cool reply saying, that's been noted.
Wow.
And, you know, I sort of said, you know, if there's any problem, you know, if you want to kind of talk more about equality and diversity in my views, you know, let's, you know, talk to me. And it was just said noted, and then it was after that that I vanished from the website.
And so how was it confirmed that it is because of those views that you hold that they have removed you from the website?
I contacted the Free Speech Union because I felt I didn't really know what to say to them. I was just very, very puzzled.
Yes.
And I felt I needed a bit of advice about how to go forward. The Free Speech Union, who've been absolutely marvellous, said, do a subject access request. You know, you've got the right, when you've been working for somebody, to see, you know, their internal communications about you. And that revealed that, you know, there'd been people saying, is Sybil working on a project? Let's get rid of her. And
wow, OK.
Right,
so these were in emails and things like this.
And they were the sort of responses that you might give if somebody had been sticking their hand in the till or, you know, been violently abusive to a client or something. So that's really, you know, then ACAS got involved. I was advised about employment tribunal procedures.
Yes.
And now it's ended up, I've got a tribunal coming up in September, which is in 2 stages. So sort of stage 1 is because when I joined Cornerstones, there's an agreement that I'm what's called an independent contractor.
Yeah.
That's a complicated one because independent contractor sounds great. I wasn't really that independent.
OK.
You know, that they are the people, Cornerstones were the people who drew up the contracts, who decided what cut of the fee I got, and really very much controlled how I worked.
So you were working very much for them and with them.
Yes.
And now they've decided they just don't... But to what extent do your personal beliefs mean that they are in violation of some kind of law here?
Well, when I'd actually emailed them, I talked, sort of talking about, you know, the way in which I interpreted equality and diversity inclusion. I said, I know that there's been a bit of a clampdown on, you know, women being able to discuss, you know, how they feel as women, wanting women-only spaces. What I think is really brilliant is that Maya Forstater has won her case. You know, it's that, you know, I'm a gender-critical feminist and, you know, my beliefs are worthy of respect. You know, discussing these beliefs are completely within the law.
Your beliefs are protected by law since that case.
Absolutely. So that because I'm a gender-critical feminist and I talk about it, it seemed to be that the beliefs I was expressing on Twitter were being equated by Cornerstones as, I don't know, well, because they never gave me a proper explanation, it's a little difficult for me to know
what kind of things were you saying?
I think I was talking about my concerns about, you know, proposed reform to the Gender Recognition Act. I think I tweet quite a lot about the importance of women-only spaces. I live in Birmingham, and, you know, for a lot of Muslim women, for them to be able to sort of, you know, go to socialise, to exercise, it's important that there are women-only swimming sessions, that there are women-only gyms. And if those spaces, become open to somebody according to how their gender identity, then women, you know, religious women aren't able to use those spaces.
Of course, yes.
And that's something which is, I think, should be of huge concern.
And, of course, we've had debates about prison accommodation, hospital accommodation, even domestic violence, refuge centres, those kind of things, where women's only spaces, it's obvious that they need to be preserved to preserve people's rights.
But I mean, so I'm a writer, I'm an editor, but I mean, I'm also a member of society, and I just, want to be able to take part in all the social debates that are happening. And I think freedom of expression is really important for
But you weren't being abusive online, or saying these outrageous, horrible things. These are the kind.
I'd never want to target an individual. For example, if I saw a photograph, I think one thing that I did that may have possibly triggered this is there was a photograph of a man with very pronounced 5 o'clock shadow, but of a more feminine appearance, and somebody had tweeted, not quite what you want to see when you go in the ladies' loo.
Yes.
And my response had been nightmare, because I think the situation for women is nightmarish. We've always been told that we need to look after ourselves, we need to keep ourselves safe.
Yes.
And that, any space where you're undressing, you're less safe, you're more vulnerable. But it's no longer really possible to complain if your space is being violated, because you're at risk from male violence, but you're also at risk of being called transphobic and a bigot if you object to a male-bodied person in your space.
And clearly also at risk of losing your job.
Yes, which seems rather high price to pay.
Yeah.
And I'm challenging the legality of their decision. So first of all, I need to clarify that although nominally I was an independent contractor, that really that is more a device by which some employers will try to avoid taking any kind of responsibility.
I understand. So in terms of your case against them, we should say, where can people support you? Obviously, you've got a crowdfunder for this.
Yes, there's a website called Crowd Justice, and if you Google that and free speech rights, or you put in my name, Sybil Ruth, you'll be able to find details
And I know
of the case.
the Free Speech Union have been tweeting about this as well, so you'll be able to find it through the Free Speech Union.
Yes.
Who are doing some fantastic work to defend women like yourself who are put in this position, people who are threatened with losing their jobs because they have an opinion that's protected by law.
Yes, and I mean, I absolutely believe, that when we're at work, that we need to be respectful to our colleagues, we need to be respectful to our customers. But I also feel that when we're at home, when we're talking to our friends, when we're talking to people on social media, that we need to be able to express our lawful opinions without employers saying, we don't like that, we don't agree with that, you're out.
Absolutely. Sybil Ruth, thank you so much for joining me today. After the break on Free Speech Nation, author and academic Frank Ferretti will be joining us to discuss the Archbishop of Canterbury's latest foray into politics. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has been sticking his nose into censorship issues. At a speech to the Board of Deputies of British Jews last week, he was asked what could be done to curb prejudice in universities. His suggestion was for the government to cut funding to those that neglect to protect minority students from being abused, insulted and excluded. But should the Archbishop be meddling in campus politics? Well, author and academic Frank Furedi has written about this very topic for his new Spiked column called The Archbishop of Political Correctness, and we can speak to Frank now. Frank, thanks so much for joining us on the show. I want to ask you first about your article. Now, it is your view that the Archbishop of Canterbury has made an error here. What is it?
Well, I think he's made several errors. He basically confused the position of Jewish students who are facing a lot of discrimination. They're being cancelled very often on campuses with the position that trans activists face. And what he's really saying is that these two groups face very similar problems. So that's problem number one. But the problem number two is he basically says, I believe in free speech, but I don't believe in people. I think we need to protect people from being abused or insulted. And it seems to me that if you're saying that you have to protect people from being insulted to the point at which you prevent people from speaking freely, then what you are really saying is that people have a right not to be offended. And if you argue that, then basically you violate the very norms of the freedom of expression in a university, because very often in the course of academic debates and discussion, it may well be the case that I inadvertently or even explicitly will insult your views, just because the stakes are so high when you're debating important philosophical or other questions.
Now, Frank, can I ask you about this? Because, you know, if a student is being discriminated against or harassed or abused, then surely the university should be stepping in. But isn't the problem here that some students are interpreting perfectly legitimate opinions as forms of abuse?
Well, that's right. I think just by merely saying, for example, that there are two biological sexes and that's it, a lot of people will say that you're harming me, you're abusing me, you're hurting me, and therefore you should be shut down. But also the number of points that people make about everyday life, which are now interpreted as abusive or harmful, is expanding all the time. And I think what I've seen in the universities is a situation where all you got to say is, I'm abused, I'm insulted, I feel harmed, and that's the end of discussion. And there's no way of actually sort of saying, well, at the end of the day, you know, we are discussing philosophical or biological or academic questions, and those discussions are not about hurting anybody, they're about resolving tricky questions.
Is it just that the Archbishop doesn't really understand what's going on university campuses, so that he conflates overt anti-Semitism, for instance, with a feminist saying there are only two sexes? He thinks that that's somehow the same.
Well, at first I thought maybe he's a little bit out of touch, maybe he doesn't quite grasp the dynamics of campus politics. But when you read his stuff more closely, it's very evident that he's really bought into trans ideology. He's really bought into the idea that we shouldn't be unpleasant to people who believe that there are hundreds of genders, that somehow we should accommodate to them, and that we shouldn't really express our views that contradict their views, because that somehow is unfair and discriminatory. So the Archbishop has, in effect, gone on that side of the debate. He's basically accepted the assumptions of trans ideology, and therefore it's not surprising that his views on the freedom of speech does not extend to people like myself who would question some of their assumptions.
So is the distinction between, say, a gay student being subjected to homophobic slurs, anti-gay slurs, and that, as compared to, say, them having to listen to a Christian's point of view who says that they don't believe in same-sex marriage, is that the kind of distinction you'd like to see?
Exactly. So, for example, we can be entirely, we should be able to be entirely relaxed about discussing the rights and wrongs of same-sex marriage. We can talk about the different views on that. And I think that people should be able to listen and discuss and argue about it. I think that's what a free society does. On the other hand, if I basically say something horrible to a person on the ground of their sexuality, on the ground that, for example, they're gay, that's a different story altogether, because then, we're not discussing an idea, we're not debating the content of a particular concept. I'm just merely there to attack and hurt somebody using words that are likely to upset and damage somebody else's point of view, and there's a different story altogether.
Well, Frank, Freddie, thank you for making that distinction. I think it's very important. Thanks for joining me today on Free Speech Nation. Time now for a quick break, but don't go away. There is loads more to come between now and 9 o'clock. See you in a few minutes.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. I hope you were able to enjoy your weekend. It has been a rather blustery one for many of us, but as we come to the end of Sunday, low pressure is pushing its way off towards Scandinavia, allowing those isobars to widen out, and the winds will be easing throughout this evening and overnight. Still, though, some showers lingering primarily across western areas of England and Wales, but more persistently across areas of Scotland, some longer spells in there at times as well. Elsewhere, we will see some clear intervals developing, and in those clear intervals, temperatures dropping down to around 11 or 12 degrees Celsius, so a touch fresher compared to some recent nights. Where you have those clear intervals, though, it means that you'll see some sunshine first thing to start off the new working week. A cloudy affair for Scotland, but all of us will eventually see some showers developing as we head throughout the day. Again, they could be heavy in places, particularly through central eastern areas of England. Some thunderstorms and hail is also possible. But with the winds turning lighter compared to the weekend, where you see those sunny intervals in between the showers, it will just feel that bit warmer as well, highs around 20-23 degrees Celsius. It's a Tuesday. Our focus then turns to this low pressure centre that's going to start pushing its way in from the west. So quite a damp start to Tuesday for Northern Ireland, and that rain will then push its way into northern Wales, northern England, lots of southern Scotland as well. Far north of Scotland, seeing sunshine and showers. The far south east of England also as well, staying relatively dry throughout. But as we head towards the end of the week, sunshine and showers returns once again. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
There's plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation this week, but let's get a news update first from Aaron Armstrong.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB Newsroom. Spain's Carlos Alcaraz has beaten Novak Djokovic in a 5-set classic to win his first Wimbledon title. Alcaraz lost the first set 6-1 before winning the next two. Djokovic, the defending champion, won the fourth to take the match to a decider, but he was broken early in the fifth set and never recovered. Alcaraz, the world number one, winning the final set 6-4 for a second Grand Slam title. Djokovic had been bidding to equal Roger Federer's record of 8 Wimbledon victories and equal Margaret Court's overall record of 24 Grand Slam singles titles. Europe is bracing for more severe heat amid predictions of the hottest temperatures ever experienced on the continent. Wildfires are continuing to burn out of control on the Spanish island of La Palma in the Canaries. At least 4,000 people have been evacuated as a result, with almost 115,000 acres of land affected. British holidaymakers travelling to southern Europe are being advised to take precautions, with forecasters predicting that parts of Italy and Greece could reach 48.8. That's the hottest ever temperature recorded in Sicily 2 years ago. Meanwhile, rescue teams in South Korea are continuing to retrieve victims who've been trapped in a flooded tunnel. It's unclear how many people remain missing. At least 37 people have died as a result of heavy downpours, which have caused landslides and floods. More than 8,800 people have been ordered to evacuate their homes. Meanwhile, the government is hailing the UK joining an Indo-Pacific trading bloc, although critics say the economic benefits will be minimal. The Business Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, says the deal will bring British companies a step closer to a market of 500 million people with fewer barriers, which they claim could create access to £12 trillion worth of global trade. Official estimates, though, suggest it will add just £1.8 billion a year to the economy, which represents less than 1% of UK GDP. The last ship to set sail from Ukraine under the Black Sea grain deal has left the port of Odessa a day before the agreement expires. It allows Ukraine to safely export grain during the war against Russia and has eased fears of global food shortages while stabilising prices. Now, Russia says it won't renew the deal until Western sanctions on its own exports are lifted, although President Erdogan of Turkey, who brokered the original agreement, says he's confident it will be extended. And the British actress and singer Jane Birkin has died at the age of 76 at her home in Paris. Well, President Emmanuel Macron has paid tribute to Ms Birkin and described her as a French icon. Jane Birkin charmed both France and the UK with her music and fashion, and her big hit Je t'aime with the late Serge Gainsbourg. The actress was also the inspiration for the Hermes Birkin designer handbag. TV online, DAB+ radio, and on TuneIn too. This is GB News. Now it's back to Andrew in Free Speech Nation.
Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So let's get some more questions from our viewers. Our first question comes in from Daniel. OK, so this is an email, and Daniel says, is charity racist? OK, so I know what this is about. So this is Lankerley Chase, who's a major UK charitable foundation. It's worth £130 million. It's announced it's going to close after concluding that traditional philanthropy is, quote, a function of colonial capitalism. OK, what's going on here, Josh?
What's going on is that just ridiculousness and our culture eating itself. Essentially, by the way, this charity money wasn't raised by historical, racism or anything like that. It was made its money in the last half of the century selling property in North London.
Yeah.
But the idea is that making money is in itself makes you part of the colonial racist system. But of course, the ridiculous thing here is that they're going to give away this money. Normally they give away 13 million a year or something, right?
Yeah.
To good causes. Brilliant. And they've got this big war chest of like 130 million, but by giving it all away, they're then not going to make the interest over the years to keep on fueling.
Right?
So they're just going to give it all away at once. But in the long term, they'd make more impact by giving it away piecemeal.
I don't get this, Victor. So they were doing real good, giving it to really good causes, and now they're saying the very act of us raising money is colonial? Does that make any sense to you?
It does. It does sound very racist to me. On behalf of all black people, we will be sending in our bank details, and we want full £130 million within the next month.
And I think that's reasonable.
I think
they should do that.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's just one of those things.
It's ridiculous. Charity is a core tenement of many different cultures. In Judaism, it's tzedakah. It's part of what these every culture to a degree has some element of it. So
yeah, absolutely.
At what level is this different from that?
Well, in Islam, you have to give a certain percentage of your salary to charity. Are those people now being racist by doing that? I mean, I don't understand where this.
I need to look into all charities now to make sure that black people are getting their money.
Well, from every single charity.
No, I don't know.
Even the RSPCA,
maybe
even
whatever,
Save the Children,
Tommy Robertson, whatever. We need to look at all of them.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you found a way to make this about you. And
thank you.
Let's get another question in, though. This is from Bobby. Bobby says, is football no longer a working man's game? OK, I did read about this. It was TNT Sports, which I don't watch, right? But they've announced their new frontline presenters for the Men's Premier League. This is for the next season. And they've said that they wanted an all-female hosting trio. And the reason is they want to remove laddish banter. Now, Victor, is laddish banter offensive, do you think?
Nah, it's part of football, isn't it?
Well, you would say that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, are you a football fan?
Of course.
How would you feel about a show about your sport and it's three women, but it's not just three women being sort of having banter. They've deliberately been put there so that it's more feminine and more,
As long as I select the women. No, I'm joking. But no...
Why are you joking? That sounds like a good idea.
No, it's true.
Yeah.
No, but... Doesn't really matter.
Well, do you think there's a kind of toxicity within football, maybe? Like the way that some men...
Yeah, there is. But that's part of the game.
This is an interesting debate I've had with a number of people, is that, because the way, I'm not someone who's watched football, and when I see people chanting and jeering and the way that football fans talk, I kind of think, oh, that's a bit much for me. But then football fans tell me that's part of that culture. It's not real. It's kind of performative. What do you think?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I remember being on the train with my son coming back from a gig, and we'd gone away for the weekend, and there was a bunch of football fans coming in, and them all drinking at 10 in the morning and swearing and being whatever, and I was just like, I was just explaining to my son, this is why I'm not into football. This is part of the culture that I don't like.
Right.
And he's really betrayed me by becoming a massive football fan.
Yeah, so it didn't work, Josh.
It did not work at all.
But do you think he would be helped by seeing more women presenters on these shows?
No, I think he gets something from football. He gets a tribalism, he gets the laddish banter with his mates, and that's why he got into it.
But there is something in that, isn't there? Some men just need that sort of laddish...
Yeah, and to be honest with you, most people watch football illegally anyway, so...
Do they?
Yeah.
But also, I mean, look, I'm sure that they're really good at their jobs, I'm sure they know lots about football, but the idea that you have to push it so far the other way or to get rid of the core tenement of, I imagine, a big chunk of their audience. Let's just see what happens to their viewing figures.
Well, we'll see. OK, well, we're going to get a question now from the audience. Where is Carl?
Here.
Hello, Carl. How are you? It was just a pleasantry. You don't need to sound...
Okay.
What's your question, Carl?
If a child identifies himself as a cat, would that be a concern to you?
Well, look, I know why you're raising this, Carl, because this has been a big story, obviously. It was actually now 2 weeks ago. There was that audio recording, I don't know if you heard it, that went viral, and it was a teacher berating these two teenage girls because they refused to accept a pupil as a cat, a pupil who identifies as a cat. Whether this was a theoretical pupil who wanted to be a cat or an actual pupil, there's been a big debate about that. But the point was that the teacher called them despicable. And there was a sudden Ofcom inspection, which was, I think it was Kemi Badenoch who suggested that this go ahead. And Ofsted, rather. And Ofsted has determined there was no serious concern. Now, Josh, I've heard you talk about this before. You've been following the cat story.
Yeah.
Do you think it's right that there's no concern here at this school?
I think it's ridiculous for them to say that there's no concern, because we all heard it with our own ears, that you had a teacher calling students despicable, insinuating that they should be expelled for just saying that women don't have penises. And I think it's a massive issue. There's a lot... People seem to be focusing on this, whether the cat existed or not.
Yes.
But not really focusing on the real issue here, where you have a teacher essentially being abusive. Towards a bunch of 13-year-old girls who are standing up. So for the school then to turn around afterwards and go, no, we actually respect students and we allow this, it's a good space for this. It's like, no, we've seen evidence that it's not.
What do you make of all this, like, people... So Catherine Burbelsing, who I've had on this show, she's the headmistress of Michaela School. She's been in touch with a number of teachers who say, yes, we have cats in our school, not actual cats.
Oh, okay.
We have pupils who identify as cats. So it is a thing. It's probably a very rare...
I don't think she said it was at her school. I think
no,
it was...
at a different...
Oh,
exactly,
sorry,
different school.
Have all the teachers and the pupils been drug tested?
They have not, no. That might explain
a lot of things.
Or a better explanation might be, I think, because the pupils have been told that you can't question people's identity, they're having a joke. They're basically, oh, OK, in that case, I'm a cat. There was one pupil who said he was a moon and he wore a cape to school.
Okay.
And now I think that's someone who's having a laugh.
That's a bit of banter. That's it, football banter.
I think it is.
But I think they should take the people that think they're cats, take them to London Zoo, put them in the lion's cage and say, well, you're a cat, meet your uncle.
That is a really good idea. See how far... It's also a good test.
Yeah.
Because if the lion doesn't accept them as a cat,
exactly.
I'm not going to accept them as a cat.
Yeah,
that's a really good idea. I think we should
do that.
Right, we're going to move on now. We've got another question, hopefully. This is from Jenny. Jenny has emailed in. Thank you, Jenny. So Jenny says, does anyone watch EastEnders anymore? Now, this is an interesting... So I've never seen EastEnders, OK? I've never seen it. Impossible. Don't judge me. No, honestly, I haven't. Not even in passing, right? And I used to watch Neighbours. Big fan of Mrs. Mangle. Wow. Now, apparently, EastEnders in particular is really struggling, just in terms of viewing numbers. There's part of this is because of competition with streaming services, of course, but a lot of critics have said that EastEnders in particular is experiencing this huge drop in ratings because they have these storylines, what they call woke storylines, which we know don't land well with the general public because the general public are all pretty decent people who don't need to be preached at, right? I mean, isn't that the issue here, Victor? Like, people just want to watch stupid drama, people murdering their neighbours and setting fire to... I don't know what happens in EastEnders, but...
I think as well, when EastEnders was at its heyday, the characters were real. We all identify with the characters. But now the characters, they're not real. And when you watch reality TV, the characters on the reality TV are real because it's reality.
But
so
weren't the storylines always a bit... I mean, I don't know, but weren't they always a bit far-fetched, some of these
I don't think it's the storyline. I think it's the characters.
Is it?
We're just not connecting with them anymore.
OK, interesting. Do you watch EastEnders?
I used to watch EastEnders, and it was really good for a long time. In the 90s, it was like it was really witty and sort of knowing. But like you say, I think part of it is the storylines.
Yeah.
Part of it is modern technology now, streaming and being able to just watch one episode after the other. And the other thing is that was also mentioned in this article is that it's just not realistic representation of that part of London anymore, where you have these properties that are worth a huge amount of money. There's just it isn't like that.
So is it still,
doesn't exist.
Is it still about working class communities, presumably?
Yeah.
But it's like in the middle of Whitechapel, where it's really gentrifying now, and that sort of
They don't even speak English around that part.
Around Whitechapel. Is that where it's set? Am I right in thinking it's around that sort of area? Okay, but so isn't it? I was always told, and again, I'm not speaking from experience, they're always very depressing storylines. So
Very
why was it
depressing.
popular? Why do people want to watch?
It's the characters. We identified with them. I don't know. I didn't even know EastEnders was still on. But
Really? That's how little interest.
Yeah, I've given
It's so interesting. Doctor Who had a similar thing. They started doing these so-called woke storylines.
Oh, brilliant.
And people stopped. Because there was like a trans alien giving birth.
Yeah. But you're seeing the same thing on Netflix. You're seeing all of these places. They're putting ideology first before story top trumps everything.
And did you see the episode of Doctor Who when they went back and they found the first ever Doctor Who?
No.
And it was a black girl.
I didn't see that. I didn't see that.
Genius.
I mean, but they do. They are losing ratings. There's no getting around it. It's absolutely fascinating.
When they're all on drugs.
And that seems to be your answer for everything. They're all on drugs. OK, we've got a question now from Tom. Tom says, Andrew, do you fancy a weekend getaway in space? It's very flirtatious. So this is actually about Virgin Galactic. They've announced that they're starting their first public space tourism flight. Apparently that's going to be in August. Now, the 3 customers paid up to $450,000 for the trip. I wouldn't do this, Victor. I'm thinking, there's not much up there.
No.
It's called space for a reason.
And I've looked into it. You do not get no Tesco Club points.
You don't get anything?
Nothing.
You see, because if you did, that would be a lot of reward points.
And it's not on Wowcher, so it's just...
I just wouldn't want to do it anyway because it doesn't feel safe to me.
It doesn't, and if you get lost, you can't call an Uber. I mean, it's just...
What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge amount of money, and I think you get a couple of minutes or something at...
What?
That weightlessness part of it is just... It's a couple of minutes long. Also, I hope they pay for the return. Do you, land where you took off or whatever? How are you going to get back? I've run out of all my money. I need to get a bus.
Yeah.
That's astonishing. 450 grand as well.
Is it EasyJet or...?
Is it EasyJet? If it's Ryanair, they'll probably put you the other side of the galaxy, and you have to kind of make your own way. OK, well, look, coming up on Free Speech Nation, after a concerned parent's tweet went viral this week, you're going to hear my take on the teaching of gender identity ideology in UK schools. But before that, the latest weather update.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. I hope you were able to enjoy your weekend. It has been a rather blustery one for many of us, but as we come to the end of Sunday, low pressure is pushing its way off towards Scandinavia, allowing those isobars to widen out, and the winds will be easing throughout this evening and overnight. Still, though, some showers lingering primarily across western areas of England and Wales, but more persistently across areas of Scotland, some longer spells in there at times as well. Elsewhere, we will see some clear intervals developing, and in those clear intervals, temperatures dropping down to around 11 or 12 degrees Celsius, so a touch fresher compared to some recent nights. Where you have those clear intervals, though, it means that you'll see some sunshine first thing to start off the new working week. A cloudy affair for Scotland, but all of us will eventually see some showers developing as we head throughout the day. Again, they could be heavy in places, particularly through central eastern areas of England. Some thunderstorms and hail is also possible. But with the winds turning lighter compared to the weekend, where you see those sunny intervals in between the showers, it will just feel that bit warmer as well, highs around 20-23 degrees Celsius. Into Tuesday, our focus then turns to this low pressure centre that's going to start pushing its way in from the west. So quite a damp start to Tuesday for Northern Ireland, and that rain will then push its way into northern Wales, northern England, lots of southern Scotland as well. Far north of Scotland, seeing sunshine and showers. The far south east of England also as well, staying relatively dry throughout. But as we head towards the end of the week, sunshine and showers returns once again. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio, and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This week, a tweet went viral which appeared to show a written test for a 10-year-old schoolchild in which they were quizzed on gender identity ideology. In order to get the right answers, the child has to show that they support the ideology, even though it's a belief system held by a tiny minority of the population. Now, I've been in touch with the person who posted the tweet, but for understandable reasons, she doesn't want to reveal the name of the school. That being the case, I cannot verify its authenticity. But here's the interesting point. People are sharing it online because it resonates with their own experiences. Now, I've got no reason to believe it isn't true, but even if it turned out to be a hoax, it's being shared because it's so similar to what children are actually being taught in schools. If anything, it's much milder than the materials that actually have been verified. When MP Miriam Kate spoke in Parliament about some of the graphic lessons that are being taught, and that in some cases children were being told that there are 72 genders, she was accused of lying. The MP, John Nicholson, posted a tweet saying, "It's not true, didn't happen." Except that it did. The government launched an investigation into the appearance of a visiting speaker at a school in the Isle of Man and confirmed that the children had, in fact, been told that there could be up to 72 gender identities. There had certainly been some misinformation about this story, but that part was actually true. And here's a clip from a school lesson resource produced by the BBC called Identity: Understanding Sexual and Gender Identities.
What are the different gender identities?
That's a really, really exciting question to ask.
Do you know there are so many gender identities? So we know we've got male and female, but there are over 100, if not more, gender identities now. So we know that some people might feel like they're two different genders, so people might think they're bi-gender, and then you've got some people who might call themselves genderqueer, who are just like, I don't really want to be anything in particular, I'm just going to be me.
So in a sense, John Nicholson is right. These particular kids aren't being taught about 72 gender identities, they're being taught about more than 100. And what about the Welsh Government's controversial relationships and sexuality education curriculum? Parents launched a judicial review in the High Court late last year to oppose this scheme, but they lost their case. But it's definitely real, and the materials are all online for anyone to see. Let's take the agenda pamphlet. Now, Kirsty Williams, who was Welsh Education Minister until 2021, has claimed that the agenda pamphlet, produced in 2016 by the Welsh Government in collaboration with Cardiff University, has been used widely throughout Wales. According to The Telegraph, it's been promoted to all schools in Wales. Now, they call this thing a pamphlet, but it's actually 170 pages long, and it teaches children how to be social justice activists, offering ideas and strategies to push the new religion of intersectionality. Here's a direct quotation. "It's hard when school rules and cultures reinforce gender norms every day by dividing us into boys and girls for class quizzes, sitting boys next to girls in tests, or have a gendered uniform policy and gender-segregated toilets. The UK government is now producing guidelines to make clear that a boy cannot identify his way into girls' toilets facilities, so it will be interesting to see how the Welsh Government deals with that. Anyway, this agenda document also describes the Mixed Muffin Gender Berry Challenge, where the pupil activists make some muffins with blueberries inside to represent masculinity and some with raspberries inside to represent femininity, and there are some mixed flavoured muffins to represent gender neutrality, and then staff are then asked to break open the muffins and then stand by coloured balloons that match the muffins. I mean, it all gets very confusing. Basically, there's a lot of muffins and balloons to make some kind of inane point. It sounds quite expensive, it's certainly a waste of time, and it's utterly surreal. There's also another version of this particular agenda pamphlet. This was produced in 2019, and it was aimed at teachers of 7 to 11-year-olds. Now, this defines gender identity as a person's inner sense of self. Gender identity does not necessarily relate to the sex a person is assigned at birth. Feelings about gender identity start early, around the age 2 or 3, which is strange because gender identity is a highly contested concept. Very few people believe it exists. So why doesn't this government document point that out? And why is it using pseudo-religious language, such as saying sex is assigned at birth? And anyway, why is the government producing lengthy documents in order to create activists as young as 7, featuring exercises such as Gender Watch Bingo, which preaches gender identity ideology and, perhaps even more seriously, the value of equity over equality, which is an explicitly political goal. But of course, it's not just Wales. I spoke to one parent in London who showed me evidence that her 6-year-old is being shown material that is definitely not age appropriate as part of a relationship and sexuality course. In an email exchange that I have seen myself, the staff member explains that such courses are part of the national curriculum and therefore mandatory. But why does a 6-year-old need to know about sexual relationships? And the thing is, while activists continue to deny that this is going on, anyone can check for themselves. For instance, Twinkle, which is a hugely popular educational publishing house, which provides materials for teachers. Many of its resources are online. It creates worksheets aimed at primary school children, which unambiguously promote gender identity ideology. And of course, there's nothing wrong with discussing the various belief systems that exist in society, whether they be political, ideological or religious. But the teaching in schools of highly contested beliefs as though they are fact is almost certainly in violation of Section 406 of the Education Act 1996, which prohibits the promotion of partisan political views in the teaching of any subject. So we have to ask the question, are schools throughout the UK currently breaking the law? And if so, what do we do about it? Well, first we have to ignore those who are denying that it's happening. The evidence is incontrovertible. Gender identity ideology is being promoted widely in UK schools. The government is seemingly complicit, or at least is not doing anything significant to stop it. And yes, people are sometimes circulating false material, which we need to be sceptical about, because every time that happens and a lie is exposed, activists are then able to claim that the whole thing is a sham. So let's just stick to the facts. They're available to everyone, they're clear, and they reveal the extent of what's going on. We don't need to exaggerate the problem. The truth is already disturbing enough. After the break on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be joined by the playwright who's bringing the recent Mermaids versus LGB Alliance battle to the London stage. Before we do that, I just want to ask Josh Harry, because Josh, you, on the back of my monologue there, I was talking about gender identity ideology in schools. You've sort of experienced this as a parent to an extent, haven't you?
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, the kids got in I picked them up and got in the car, and they turned around. This was my then 9-year-old and 11-year-old, and they'd been in the same, brought together the same class, and they basically said something like, oh, you know, there's like 100 sexes or whatever. And I was like, what? Because obviously I've been seeing the stuff online.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, what word did they use? Gender or sex? Like, they were saying, no, it's sex. Then I sent an email to the school. I've got a meeting next week. I'm going to go in and see these slides and stuff. They also learnt about, like, pansexual. They were talking all this stuff. So, and then I put it online, and then people were like, this didn't happen, you know, it's like, the thing is, as you showed, as you illustrated, this stuff has been happening for years.
Yeah.
And that's what's so scary. For me, even just mentioning it online, I didn't expect it to kind of
But that's
kick off
interesting
like
you
that.
say that. It's always the response. This is a lie. It isn't actually happening. But there's so much evidence that it is.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I don't understand why lie about it.
It's crazy, and it's really upsetting because it is. Look, there was stuff in this course that they also learned that was good, like they were taught like that about homosexuality and that gay it shouldn't be a pejorative term, and and stuff. There was like good stuff about relationships, about how different families come in different shapes, and all these other things. But they're also crowbarring this gender ideology within all of that stuff.
Right, because it'd be one thing to say don't be abusive to gay people or trans people or anything else. Everyone's got equal rights. That's fine. I'm all for saying that, but telling kids there is definitely, you have a thing called a gender identity, which is like a kind of soul, a sex soul, and you have to believe this religious belief, otherwise you'll get in trouble. Then that's indoctrination, right? That's
exactly what it is, and it's very upsetting. And the thing is, it's not a recent phenomenon. This has been going on for years now, to the point where you have our teenagers and the 16 and the 17-year-olds teaching the young. My kids went to like a camp thing, and I got there late, and it's like, this is actually about 4 years ago. The 17-year-olds were teaching my eldest is now 14, so he must have been about 10 at the time, and teaching exactly the stuff without any adults around and whatever. So the cycle permeates itself. It's
very worrying indeed. But look, do join me after the break on Free Speech Nation. I'll be speaking to a playwright about a brand new show relating to the recent victory of LGB Alliance over Mermaids. Don't go away.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Last week we reported on how trans lobby group Mermaids lost its legal battle to have the LGB Alliance removed from the charity register. That 2-year legal challenge is now being made into a stage play. Mermaids versus the Alliance is based entirely on the transcripts of the tribunal hearing. It's the work of playwright and journalist Helen McAleer, who joins me now. Helen, welcome to the show. Thank you. Now, I've seen a number of verbatim plays over the time. They often take political ideas, things like the Vagina Monologues, the Laramie Project. They've done this about the Iraq War, various things.
Bloody Sunday was the big
Bloody Sunday.
The Bloody Sunday Tribunal, actually, yeah.
Yes.
It's a very British idea. It's a very verbatim theatre, really started here in London.
And was that your idea then? Well, let's just apply this to this story.
Yeah, I mean, I think court cases to me are the last great place where the truth is told, you know, where you're not allowed to have political slogans. And I wasn't really following this case at the time, but I saw some publicity about it, something about it, and I just wanted to know more about it. And I read the transcripts, and the truth is very compelling, and this is what this is. This is people telling the truth. It's also very funny when you see what people don't, once they are faced tough questions, what little is there. There's no there.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, trans activists and gender ideologues have often said no debate. Stonewall says we never debate, and Mermaids have always said no debate. Now, they can't say that to a judge. You know, if they're in a court of law, you have to answer the questions, otherwise you're breaking the law. So they were suddenly in a position where they had to defend gender identity ideology, and it didn't work out well for them.
Yeah, I felt like calling the play Mermaids versus the Alliance a comedy.
Yeah.
It really is that funny, that farcical, because when you're defending... And as I say, a courtroom is probably the last great conservative place on earth, because you go in there, you're obliged to tell the truth. You can't get away with political slogans. You can't get away with cliché. You can't get away with just throwing some figure off.
Well, what were some of the examples? I mean, one that sticks in my mind, because I was reading the transcripts as they were coming out in real time, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. For instance, one of the Mermaids representatives, when they were asked about the Cass Review, which of course is the report by Hilary Cass into the Tavistock Gender Paediatric Clinic, very important document. When they were asked about that, they said, well, I only skim-read it, I'm not familiar. I'm like, but this is your area. If you haven't read the most important report in your area of expertise, clearly you're not doing your job.
No, and they kind of pretended that they were kind of, it's a kind of peripheral to what we do, and it's like, but it's not peripheral what you do. And in fact, you were part of almost like an adjunct of the Tavistock Clinic.
Well, they were informing them, but also the Mermaids is a paediatric gender charity.
Yes,
right.
Yes. So and they were part of the railroad track. People would come in and they would refer them on to Tavistock, and to not have read or to say they didn't read it, it's comedic almost if it wasn't so sad.
Are there any other elements in particular that stuck out for you?
Well, I mean, they were actually asked if someone identifies as transgender, are they now a woman? And the ultimate answer was yes, even if they haven't had any surgery, not just legally, but actually.
Right.
They were actually, and my personal favourite is this tribunal was in September of 2022. And they just couldn't talk enough about how wonderful the example of Scotland was.
Yes.
With that wonderful progressive Nicola Sturgeon, and how they had got the whole transgender thing in prisons all worked out.
Yeah, that works out well.
Yeah, and it was just like you're reading this and you're going, "This is really funny." And I was sort of, I was thinking, putting in a little context, thinking, "No, I'll just leave it like that because it's just a wonderful capsule in time." It was sort of before the media realised, we can ask difficult questions about this.
Well, yes, I think that was the first time with with the revelations that the SNP were effectively greenlighting male rapists in women's prisons. At that point, people started thinking, hang on a minute.
Yes, and journalists finally got some whatevers and asked these difficult questions, and they had no answers.
No.
And that was the thing that came across in the transcript for the play was, they have no... I mean, it's so skin deep, literally. Yeah. Sometimes not even that. There's just no there.
Well, I had Bev and Kate from the LGB Alliance on the show, and, you know, it was very upsetting for them, I think, to be put on the stand as old-school lesbian activists who've been pro-gay rights for so long, to be put on the stand and say, you know, can a lesbian have a penis? You know, what is a lesbian? These are things that we've all, as a society, taken for granted for a long time. And as they point out, it's really anti-gay, a lot of this stuff.
Oh, yeah, and they point out they were fighting these questions back in the 70s when they were asked with a lot more vigour and maybe hostility.
Yes.
And they've done that. They've been there, they've done that. And they thought they were in as they said in the transcripts, you know, UK used to be the best place in the world to be gay.
Yeah.
And now they feel under threat. Now they're getting thrown off lesbian dating websites if they say, I will not date a transgender person with a penis.
It's interesting that in Australia, in some areas of Australia, it's now illegal to have an all-women gathering. You can't have a lesbian gathering because you have to admit people who claim to be lesbians, even if they're not.
Well, there are no more lesbian bars in London. Right. You know, and they made that point in the hearing, and I think that's very interesting. Yeah. That these spaces are getting smaller and smaller. But I mean, I don't try and take any sides. I try and give both sides in the play. But it's very interesting. One side has answers, the other just falls away under question.
Well, that's interesting as well. You don't need to edit too much. You just present what was said. I mean, that's what's fascinating about verbatim theatre. Yeah. But also that, you know, courtroom drama is always great as well. You know, there's always some kind of tension. The idea of people being interrogated.
Well, Rooney versus Vardy was you know, it's the same thing, by the way. You know, people go into court with all sorts of ideas, thinking they can just say what they've always said.
Yes.
Courtroom is a very difficult place to lie in.
And is that why? I mean, you're often attracted to political ideas within your creative work. And do you think that that's a really good way of addressing political and social issues is through drama?
Totally. I did the Ferguson play, which was about the foundation of the BLM movement in the shooting of Michael Brown in America. And when I did the script, and it was African-American eyewitnesses to the shooting from the grand jury, 9 of the actors walked out during rehearsals.
Really?
Yes, because the truth didn't match what the TV had told them. You know?
That's interesting.
Yeah, so it comes as a shock to a lot of people, the truth.
Yes.
Especially when the media gets onto a story and misrepresents it.
And you've also done films as well, haven't you?
Yes, we did a story about an abortion doctor in America, Kermit Gosnell. He had a big trial. We've done a movie about Hunter Biden starring Lawrence Fox.
Yes, My Son Hunter.
Yes, based on his extensive laptop hard drive.
Yeah, I mean, but that again is a very interesting story because that's one the media wanted. I mean, the social media companies tried to cover it up entirely.
They did cover it up, and but they haven't been able to cover it up since. It just keeps bubbling along and bubbling along.
Yes.
If they'd lanced the boil maybe back then, it wouldn't still be bubbling along.
Yes.
But people know that they're not being told the truth, and I think people know there's more to this transgender story than they're being told.
Absolutely.
And a courtroom is a great place to go there and get that.
And how many actors are involved in this production?
There's 9 actors.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a staged reading, dramatised stage reading, and I'm really putting it on so that maybe someone will say, let's put on a full production in London, because I want to take it to every town hall in the UK, because this is not just a London problem. This is a problem in small towns all over the UK, because your kids have the internet, you know, and your kids are getting this, and they're getting it at school, as you said, and they're being told by teachers they really like. School is different from when we were young. We used to hate our teachers. Now kids really like their teachers, and they're being told there's 72 genders. And you're telling them they're not, and you're old and fuddy-duddy, and these are the cool teachers, and the internet's telling them that, and TikTok's telling them. We need to go to every town hall. I need to go to every school and take this play, and it's just verbatim. There's no editorialising in this.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you're just presenting it as it is,
yes.
and people can make their own mind up.
Of course, yes.
That's fascinating. So before you go, Phelim, tell us, where is this on and how can people get tickets to see it?
It's on in the Camden Club Saturday, July 22nd, 8 p.m. Go to mermaidsplay.com. mermaidsplay.com.
Perfect.
And you get tickets there. Still tickets left.
Fantastic. Phelim Macaulay, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
So after the break on Free Speech Nation, it's time for Social Sensations. We've got another Biden blunder and the latest from the Hobby Horse Championships in Finland. Don't miss it.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So every week we dedicate this part of the show to the world of social media. Now, first up, more proof, if we need it, that Joe Biden really doesn't know that today is Sunday. Let's have a listen.
Vladimir and I, shouldn't be so familiar. Mr. Zelensky and I talked about the kind of guarantees we could make in the meantime.
OK, so that's the leader of the free world referring to Zelensky as Vladimir. He then followed it up a day later by referring to the Icelandic Prime Minister as a daughter of Ireland before correcting himself. What do we make? I mean, look, I always feel a bit bad because I think Joe Biden's obviously, you know, a bit slow.
Not bad enough to keep on doing these clips, though.
No, because he's the president of the USA, and if they're not going to admit... But if they're not going to admit that he's got a problem, then we have to keep flagging it, because I think it's really dangerous to have someone in that position.
Yeah, I mean, look, the amount of hours that you put into that role it's obviously it suits someone young. But you know, remember George W. Bush? He would make a lot of these.
He did, and we flagged it then. As well.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So, yes, it is a problem. I'd say that if they just keep the bomb person. That, you know, keep him in the next room. Don't keep him there.
The way to do it, wouldn't it? You know, because it is a worry when these.
I didn't see no problem with the clip. I think it's nice to see an old 56-year-old man still the president of the United States of America. Personally.
They do like their older statesmen, though.
They do, yeah.
You know, like what's Trump now? He must be knocking on 80.
We've stopped. He no longer has birthdays.
No, it doesn't exactly.
It's just Trump.
So I find it very strange. Why not get like a 40-year-old? Politician to run the free world. Why not?
Yeah, no, fine. Then you get a lot more sex scandals. It'll be great.
Absolutely. Well, that's what we like to see. Anyway, next up, here's Lorraine Kelly committing that cardinal sin of misgendering Sam Smith.
And what about Sam Smith now? Did he... he's dressed down.
Sam Smith is
Sam
not...
Smith, you've dressed down.
It's not Barbie-core. I mean, this would be... It's a super comfy airport outfit.
It is. It's a bit big for him. Now,
It's a little bit big.
If he was my son, I'd be saying, son, that's too big for you.
I mean, it is like
it's drowning you.
It's a different way to. I'd be into the jumper, but for maybe the airport. It wasn't Barbie-core, but it's their own style.
I know, but he looks like the wee shrinking man.
Okay. I mean, she kept doing it.
Yeah. But the thing is, so what? But if you live by the sword, and she's been someone within this movement, arguably, who has helped propagate it.
Yes.
Like, then you can't sort of turn around and then just, I forgot. Like, if you...
Well, someone said to me the other day, I think it was Leo, was saying that Sam Smith has actually misgendered himself at one point. You know, so, I mean, like, it's hard to remember.
Yeah, I'm confused. What was he like?
Well, he goes by they and them.
Oh.
And says he's not a man.
I was thinking he was a bear, because I was looking at the picture.
He was looking a bit like a bear in that picture, yeah, but I don't think that's what it is.
A grumpy one.
In fact, Sam Smith was the one who complained about the Brit Awards not having a gender-neutral category, which is why they got rid of Best Female Artist, Best Male Artist. But then didn't just a bunch of men get nominated?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what was she meant to call him?
Them.
They. Yeah. They look small.
Their
trousers.
Their trousers look
too baggy.
Bad on them.
Sounds like a horror movie.
Yeah, it's a lot to remember. It is a lot.
He looks happy with his identity, though. That's the important thing.
He does have some. I mean, I think I've got a bad dress sense, but that's
it's next level.
That's even worse. Okay, so we're going to move on to this next one. What's this one? Oh, this is the Hobby Horse Championships in Finland. Let's have a look. OK, so this event is held annually. Over 10,000 people in Finland are obsessed with hobby horsing, and most of them are girls between 10 and 18. All the hobby horses are handmade by their owners and are given names. And the Equestrian Federation of Finland, don't want to offend them, organises these annual championships, which has several subcategories, such as dressage and show jumping. Now, I've just come back from Finland. I didn't see any of that.
Is drugs just legal everywhere?
I think that is the only explanation at this point.
No, it's because Monty Python's their favourite comedy troupe.
Is that right?
This is all the holy grail.
So when I was there, a few people said to me that Finland is the happiest place on earth. And
I can see why.
Well, you can see that. I mean, they all seem pretty happy.
Yeah, as long as they're happy.
I mean, like, that's the sign of a healthy society, I think. Apparently it is, though. Apparently all the polls say that everyone there is the happiest. They've got more trees than anyone. 75% of the country is forest.
OK.
It's a lovely... They've got over 100,000 lakes.
They drop the most acid.
Yeah.
And they drop the most acid, so that's probably what's going on there. OK, well, look, thanks so much for sending in your unfiltered dilemmas. Every week, of course, you send in your problems, and we give you our attempts at solutions. But thank you for continually sending them in. Our first dilemma tonight is from Dylan. Dylan says, my girlfriend said she was going on a quiet girls' trip to Greece, but she's gone to Zant. Is it Zant or Zante? Zante. The friends she's with sleep around a lot and party hard. Can I trust her when she is around them? That's interesting. Where is Zante? Where is that?
Well, I was there last night, actually, and met some wonderful people.
You know where it is?
No.
Could you point to it on a map?
No.
So...
Greece, maybe?
I mean, it sounds a bit Greek, doesn't it? Well, they've got a girls' trip to Greece. So this place, is this like the sort of the Ibiza of today? You know, I'm so out.
I'm imagining, who knows? They're drinking alcohol, they're having fun.
But look, what do you think about this? Because, like, you know, if you've got a partner and they should be allowed to do what they want, right? They should be able to go, even if it's like a party place.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think as well, when he sends in the dilemma, he needs to send the exact location so that I will go there and I'll see whether there's been any problems.
I think you are the person to go there and sort that out.
I'll sort it out.
Trust, though, right? You've got to trust.
No, not if he's hanging out with a bunch of...
No?
He sounds like the captain as well. The whole thing.
You guys, this is ridiculous. You've got to be... Look, what's the point of being in a relationship if you can't trust them? You know?
I trust her not to go.
But surely, you know, if your wife was going off to...
My wife, yeah, she went to Zante this week.
Oh, yeah, okay. But she went there to see the historical sites? And...
No, she went with a bunch of wrong-un friends. I sent in that email, basically.
Oh, did you?
No.
Oh, I actually believed you there, Josh. OK, we're going to move on to this one. This is a dilemma which came in from Lara. Thank you, Lara, for sending this in. Lara says, I think my best friend is in love with me. Am I torturing him by hanging out all the time? Should I distance myself if I care about him so he can move on? Does Lara think a lot of herself there, I think?
Yeah, but I'm sure it's true.
Yeah, it's probably true.
And that's actually very nice of her to consider his feelings. Whatever. I think what she should do is sleep with him.
OK, and how is that going to solve the situation?
I just feel sorry for the guy.
Is that right? I mean, like, if you were aware that someone was infatuated with you, Victor, would you do the right thing and sort of just sever all ties?
I'll do the wrong thing, keep them around me. That's my #1 fan.
Yeah.
I'll take her everywhere.
OK,
She's here now.
I think you're the wrong person to ask about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you should do, really. I mean, if we're
I think keep her around. You've got to keep your own moral... And I was talking earlier about men's mental wealth, so... Having a woman that likes you around you...
It's good for you.
It's good for you, yeah.
It's not good necessarily for the person she's with.
Yeah. Or for your wife, maybe?
Or for... that person we keep forgetting about.
I'm just assuming they're two different people.
Yeah.
OK, and we did have one more dilemma this week, and this is coming from Mitchell. Mitchell says, should I wax my chest before I go to Ibiza on Thursday? So Ibiza still is a thing, then? OK, all right.
And is Mitchell a man or a woman?
I think Mitchell is a man, but you can never tell. You should never assume. Now, waxing the chest, is that not very painful? I mean, is that not something...
I imagine it is. I wouldn't do it. My hair on my chest is my greatest feature.
Well, yes.
That's why I have to keep it cut. That's why I do this top button up. It's just...
it's a source of your strength.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like Samson. It's like if I shave it, I go weak.
Yes. I mean, do you think... is waxing something that you would do?
I'm more concerned about the question. I mean, why would you ask 3 men, should you wax your chest before you go on Ibiza?
That is a very good point.
Ask a woman, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think he speaks for all of us. Victor speaks for all of us. We don't know. We don't know what you should do when it comes to waxing your chest, but I think the consensus is...
Also, yeah, shave it and then go to Zante or wherever it is.
Shave it and go to Zante. OK, well, look, thanks so much for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week when the Archbishop of Canterbury weighed in on the university free speech debate, football punditry became a little less laddish, and a man won Miss Netherlands. Thank you so much to my panel, Josh Howie and Victor Daniels, and to my guests, Joe Phoenix, Sybil Ruth, Frank Ferretti and Fela McAleer. And if you want to join us live in the studio, be part of our wonderful studio audience, you can do that. Just go to www.sroaudiences.com. That website address is there on the screen right now. Come along. And we've got wine, we've got food, it's a lot of fun. Stay tuned for Mark Dolan tonight. That is coming up just after the break. And please don't forget that Headliners is on every night at 11 o'clock. That's the late-night paper preview show where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories, so you don't have to bother reading the paper. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. I hope you were able to enjoy your weekend. It has been a rather blustery one for many of us, but as we come to the end of Sunday, low pressure is pushing its way off towards Scandinavia, allowing those isobars to widen out, and the winds will be easing throughout this evening and overnight. Still, though, some showers lingering primarily across western areas of England and Wales, but more persistently across areas of Scotland, some longer spells in there at times as well. Elsewhere, we will see some clear intervals developing, and in those clear intervals, temperatures dropping down to around 11 or 12 degrees Celsius, so a touch fresher compared to some recent nights. Where you have those clear intervals, though, it means that you'll see some sunshine first thing to start off the new working week. A cloudy affair for Scotland, but all of us will eventually see some showers developing as we head throughout the day. Again, they could be heavy in places, particularly through central eastern areas of England. Some thunderstorms and hail is also possible. But with the winds turning lighter compared to the weekend, where you see those sunny intervals in between the showers, it will just feel that bit warmer as well, highs around 20-23 degrees Celsius. Into Tuesday, our focus then turns to this low pressure centre that's going to start pushing its way in from the west. So quite a damp start to Tuesday for Northern Ireland, and that rain will then push its way into northern Wales, northern England, lots of southern Scotland as well. Far north of Scotland, seeing sunshine and showers. The far south east of England also as well, staying relatively dry throughout. But as we head towards the end of the week, sunshine and showers returns once again. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain.